remember the minutes. Did we get minutes from this meeting?
I forgot. I was gonna ask you about that. Did I take them last time? Who took
I
them?
thought Brian, took-
Oh, wait, I wasn't at the last meeting.
I thought Brian took them at the last meeting. Did you not?
Uh-oh.
Yes, I think he did.
We have some time.
I took,
We have some time to figure this out. That's not,
TBD, okay,
I
I
have
make a
not,
motion to pass over the minutes for this meeting.
seconded.
Second.
and Brian, I'll follow up with you about minutes.
Okay.
all right.
So, all those in favor, Jeannie, Brian?
Bypassing the notes, the minutes?
Minutes, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, we're
Aye,
taking a vote.
aye, I'm sorry.
Can be, okay, it is unanimous. Maureen still isn't on yet, right? Okay. Town treasurer's report.
So I only have the written balances and I'll share those with you. The CPA, the community housing, this is the CPA funds related to community housing, that 10% reserve is at $876,890. The affordable housing trust accounts are, we got 3 different accounts. The first one is from the special town meeting of 2014. We have a balance of $13,652. Then the other 2 accounts we have are from the November special town meeting of November 2023. And the first one was originally $100,000, which now has a balance of $97,567. And the last account from that same special town meeting was for $15,000. That was a request for the Affordable Housing Trust Action Plan. It was $15,000 was approved, and that's what the current balance is now. So the total of the Affordable Housing Trust accounts is $126,219.
126,000, do you mean?
$126,219. Yep.
Okay, town report.
I didn't have anything planned for my report, but as you all likely know, all the zoning articles passed at town meeting for some reason. So I'm still not sure how we managed to pull that off, but MBTA zoning passed with flying colors, probably would have passed a 2/3 vote. It was the moderator had no trouble deciphering whether or not that was passed. Again, that was a bit shocking. ADUs, the bylaw for ADUs that was updated to reflect the new state law passed as well. And then there was the 5G bylaw, which is not of particular relevance to this trust, but other things that I'm working on, working very hard on securing a memorandum of agreement with Governor's Landing regarding the extension of sewer and water down to that development site. And so we, by which I mean town manager, DPW director, myself, and our consultants, hoping to have an RFP out for the construction of sewer and water next month. So that is the goal, with a plan to have it shovel in the ground April of next year.
Yeah.
90% completion of that project by the end of next calendar year, 2025, and 100% completion by early 2026.
So they're not going to start actually building there until 2026, the earliest.
Oh, yeah,
They can-
correct. Yeah, I mean, I assume they would start doing some site prep once we have a shovel in the ground for the extension of the sewer. Because once that happens, we're fully committed.
Committed,
It's
yeah.
going to happen.
Yep.
So that they'll have the comfort to know that they can begin their project. But yeah, no, they wouldn't be done. I wouldn't venture a guess, but certainly they wouldn't be done in 2026, right? So.
No, but presumably it would be completed during 2027, things being equal.
the housing project that they intend, I would sort of doubt that, but yeah, they would certainly probably have units up.
Okay, I would hope so.
Yeah.
It seems to have taken forever to get this thing off the ground.
What is the process for MBTA, for the MBTA community, now that we have it zoned? Technically, when can somebody come in and say that we want to do it? What are the next steps on that? I
The
mean,
Attorney General needs to approve our bylaw.
Okay,
That's what needs to happen.
okay,
I have to do some follow-up administration with, Office of Housing and Livable Communities, to get it certified, but I just need any official town meeting information, from the clerk's office before I submit, with the state to get it certified as a MBTA community, but, that's sort of different from your question, which is, once the Attorney General certifies it, it's good.
so we don't have to wait until the end of this, 2025, even though that's the end date for action. I'm just sort of thinking
Oh.
ahead about, sort of making this real,
Mhm.
you know.
Wait, so say that again?
I'm sort of thinking about challenges.
Yeah,
And, I mean, quite frankly, and I'm
Yeah.
sort of looking at, since this is, since the vote was taken, when can Governor's Landing or anybody who wants to do the
Mhm.
denser development there, when can they come in with plans to do it? Because they'd have to go through the planning board.
So, yeah, it's what I said, as
Yeah.
soon as the Attorney General certifies
Okay,
our
so they could
bylaws,
start
they can
working
do-
on it.
And the
Right.
Attorney General has 90 days, I'm looking to Trish and Gabe, to 90 days, I believe, to certify.
I think so, but it's taken longer than that.
They've
In
requested
some
extensions in the
towns.
past, so sometimes they'll do that, as we know, which they did with our inclusionary zoning bylaw, but I'm fairly confident it's 90 days. They seem to take that 90 days.
Okay,
I'm assuming that
Yeah.
nobody's interested in expressing much of an interest in building there until we've got the sewer and water in.
Oh, yeah, completely.
So it's the
dependent upon sewer and
Yeah,
water.
so-
but they can also, I mean, one of the things that you can plan and you can design before you actually get your infrastructure, but just as long as you said, the shovels in the ground. and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, as long as the shovels are in there,
Yeah.
but they're not gonna want to
I've
spend
been
money.
communicating with Gina, that's why I keep looking at myself. I
Oh,
apologize.
she answered, she responded to you.
Yeah, yes, we're in the normal room. Yes, Gina, it's on her way.
So those are sort of the bigger, and then this plan I laid out, but I don't think I distributed it specific to this trust, but I decided to and bring it anyway, because I did share it with the planning board. I'm working with a BSC group to identify redevelopment concepts for Holy Angels and the extended block down to the Grove Street lots. Try to move it into the screen for you, Brian.
No, it's good. I can
Hold
see
it
it.
up.
Thank you. No, I can
and
see it
so-
there.
Oh, yeah,
That's
you
good.
can, yeah, it's right there. So now the camera's moved. Yeah, Holy Angels, as you can see right here, this is the Thompson block, shown in orange, but the orange denotes that this plan assumes that it would be demolished and something else would be reconstructed in its place. And then this, obviously, nothing exists here because this is the parking lots. So this imagines that a 4,500 square foot
Hey, Gina.
building would be there, as well as parking to the rear. And so this is just one of 3 concept plans that BSC is going to be providing to the Economic Development Committee, because this project is geared through them.
2 questions. The town doesn't own
We do
Thompson
not.
blocks,
No, we do not own
but
this.
it owns the other parcel?
Yes, the town owns this, and obviously the town owns Holy Angels. I did reach out to Brenda, is her name, just let her know what's going on and get her, not necessarily her buy-in, but her. If we go ahead and do this, because I needed to get authorization for BSC to get out here and delineate things, so.
So one more question, and I sort of raised this when you were doing the, sort of looking for different ideas. Any thought about doing affordable housing there?
We've not addressed that specifically yet,
Okay.
but we're basically just addressing the build out scenarios and whether or not it can be supported. And so those build out scenarios are including an assumption of either housing, because we have to assume housing because of the grant that I got to do
Yeah.
this. So we have to assume some sort of housing portion. But I think this will also imagine also a mixed use commercial component to it as well.
And Knowlton Ristine is not part of this.
No, that Knowlton's here, so it's not a part of this.
When are they supposed to start building the roundabout?
Probably not till 2026.
Good.
No.
Mike, what
we
is
need
the
a roundabout.
background?
We
Sorry,
need a
what is the
roundabout.
background, Mike, of that BSC proposal, the concept? What is that? I don't understand the background of that. What started that, and what's the who's driving
Oh,
that?
yeah. The impetus was to evaluate Holy Angels. And with the understanding that obviously the town owns Holy Angels, it's basically a liability on the town's, to the town's finances, right? Because it requires so much attention.
Sort of like another property we're very familiar with.
Yeah,
Yeah,
only on a much larger scale.
And so obviously the town doesn't just want to hold on to a liability. It's in the town's interest to do something with it.
Mhm.
That something is to be determined. It's either work with, do an apple tree arts type scenario, like in Grafton, where you have a nonprofit cultural arts type situation where they rent from the town that building for, I don't know, $1 a year or something, and then they are in charge of upgrades and upkeep for that building, which has worked out well for Grafton. So that's a potential scenario. It's also imagining does this then just become housing to some extent? Well, just doing an adaptive reuse type of scenario with maintaining the church as is, and converting it into a different use. And then, through a development agreement for whoever wants to purchase that from the town, requiring them to maintain the church as is. But converting it to whatever use that is feasible for them to do as well.
It isn't on a historical register, is it?
It's on the local register for
But
the
not
state, but not
So we don't get- Not yet. We're not gonna.
not. I'm not aware of any attempts to get it on the federal
Building board, I hope not.
national register. So yeah, that was the impetus for the project, was Holy Angels, and then Dan Lazarus from the fire department mentioned to me, he said, "Hey, you're doing all this work already for Holy Angels. It's going to cost the same amount of money to assess Holy Angels in its redevelopment capacity. Why not do the extended block down?" And I said, "Hey, that's a great idea.
yeah,
That's what we're doing."
that's good. Mike, I think Kathy mentioned it. So mixed use housing, whether it be affordable housing or mixed affordable housing and market rate, is that included in the plan? I mean, I'm trying to understand, is this just like very high early stage concept planning and then look for developers for possible interest? Okay,
Very high early concept planning. Basically, this plan is just the layout of footprint with regard to resource areas. So you can't see it on the screen there, but there's a thin blue line that denotes the FEMA floodplain, right? And that was important to get on a map, and also show where the edge of bank is for the brook, and identifying any wetlands as a result, so I can get this in front of the Conservation Commission so that they can basically certify this plan as this is where the resource areas exist. And any development proposals thereafter shall conform to the resource areas as shown on this plan. And that's a bit of a hurdle, or it's a hurdle for, it's because it's an unknown for any potential developer to invest their time and money in figuring out whether or not this stretch of land is worth their time.
Yep.
So identifying those things ahead of time, much like kind of what we've done with 28 Hartford Ave North.
Just to interject a second, this has been discussed before. And I think there was an RFQ put out a couple years ago.
Yeah.
But the whole issue has always been, there's been no wetlands delineation.
Mhm.
So you don't know what you can do because you don't know where the wetlands are. So I don't think in fact, there weren't any responses
Correct.
when it went out before. So this
Right.
is attempt to actually get some answers. So if it, when it does go out again, we'll know. I mean, we don't even know, about whether or not you can put parking there. We don't know where the wetlands is. We don't know. And this is a drawing. But
So that's still not known? Because I agree with you. I've heard that, Kathy, for years. It's a wild card not knowing that. No interest will be really put forward seriously without that information. So is that study going to be included or in this concept work that they're doing?
What,
The
what's,
wetland-
have they done the wetlands delineation?
oh yeah, that's
Oh,
what
they
this
have.
plan is showing that,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's showing it. Oh, that's great.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
Excellent.
So that, yes, that is already done and complete.
Okay. In the CPC meeting we had probably 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, there was they're doing an action plan themselves. And they were just discussing amongst the CPC members. I can't remember if you were there. And we were talking about, a lot of places do capital planning. And CPC is a good example of capital planning. You've got 4 potential uses of that capital. 3 are reserved, as you know. But then the other 70% is cumulative, that by a thoughtful process, we could maybe do something. And I was thinking of that parcel of land that you have there, Mike. And I just mentioned that's just example where you'd have community preservation possibilities there with the church. You'd have housing, our needs, that money. So possible CPA money that could really help a developer and sweeten the deal, or seed money, I guess, to start this up.
I was, I won't name names, but I was discussing this scenario with a developer. And they seemed encouraged by what we're doing and the potential for it as well. And they're obviously very understanding of those sort of setups, public-private partnership, as you were describing, Brian. So
Mhm.
I refrained from just automatically giving away the CPC money, but I did have that in the back of my mind when we were discussing that as an option going forward.
That's
And
great.
it's like one of the things that, when we're looking at partnerships, again, is I've always looked at that as being a perfect place for mixed use affordable housing.
Mhm.
Because you want people living downtown. And if you
Mhm.
have like some small, like coffee shop, something like that down there too. I mean, it would be perfect. But yeah, I think that's a really good opportunity. So.
Is there any, David mentioned something about the Worcester transit being able to come out here at some
Okay,
point.
yeah.
What's going on with that, if anything?
Oh, well, nothing, the Metro West Regional Transit Authority out of Framingham gave a presentation to the EDC a while ago, but they also just gave a presentation, that same presentation, to the select board maybe 2 months ago now. And it was just basically going over the potential benefits of taking the $60,000 that is provided on behalf of this town as an MBTA community to the MBTA, for which this town doesn't see any services. And basically saying, here you go, MWRTA, why don't you give us some services? And so, that's the long and
But
short.
they were talking about senior, right? That's what it was limited to, was senior transportation.
Really?
No, it's not, but
Okay, I thought.
it wasn't limited to, but it included that. Because it's the paratransit option.
Yeah.
That is what essentially your senior center is doing now,
Yeah.
right, with buses, they provide that. The regional transit authorities have the ability to provide that service as well. It's not necessarily just for seniors, right? It's.
I know, but I thought when we talked, I thought Joe said that, because one of the things I think we had spoken about in the past was, again, you put this
Yeah.
Try to make downtown
Mhm.
into a downtown,
Mhm.
and then have a van take people to the train station, take people other places.
So there's
And
always
he
that
said he
option.
could do
I mean,
that,
you
and Joe
can,
said
you
that
can
was-
allocate that $60,000 to provide for the services or to assist with the services that the senior, senior center is providing. But obviously, the town can choose to pay more for more services, and you can provide that as an option. Mhm.
It seems to me if we're going to talk about, we should be talking about affordable housing in that area.
Yeah.
Having some public transit would be a big selling point.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it just goes with the territory. Everybody's not going to have a car necessarily.
I'd like to move forward with the agenda just because we have three.
Yeah.
Which is why I dragged you out. We have three fairly significant things.
I'm
to
sorry,
talk
I was
about.
only at home crocheting, you know, I thought everything was tomorrow because I'm
Oh,
on
good.
vacation.
Yeah, the day before Thanksgiving, that's right, yeah. That's what it is.
I missed the parent teacher conference that was today, I thought it was tomorrow, so I'm.
Oh, so you're gonna start, don't you, dear?
Did.
I'm sorry, I haven't- ever since COVID.
So, the next thing we have is Regional Housing Coordinator Report. We do have something on the agenda later on about the action plan update. Was there anything else to cover besides the action plan update?
That'd be to you, Gabriel.
Yeah, I can in terms of Josepha's position, I'm not sure if she had anything else she wanted to bring to the group. I'll send her a message and we get you guys an email if there's anything she has to report. But I don't work too closely with her on the specific regional housing coordinator duties, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'm interested in, the other issue that we've been tracking has to do with the ADUs and whether the state come up. I know that Michael's been checking that too, but I know they haven't.
Yeah.
really-
I was on a meeting with the state, Gabe, and Trish, maybe you were on it too. And the meeting was basically soliciting some initial input, but they didn't have they
Okay,
didn't have anything ready,
okay,
unfortunately,
okay,
as far as answers.
so.
Yeah,
okay.
so we are having on December 10th, I believe it's Tuesday at 6, just Tuesday, December 10th at 6 p.m. So in a couple of weeks, I will actually be running we've been doing roundtables for relevant parties in the region about this new ADU bylaw or the new ADU regulations. So we did one in November that was more targeted at planning directors and town planners. We have one on the 10th that's going to be targeted more at board members, mostly planning board members, but I think you guys would obviously get a lot out of it. And we just got an email from I can't promise anything, but we did just get an email from the state ADU coordinator. So that we might have someone from EOHLC on that conversation. And they definitely are aware that towns are not happy and are frustrated with the new policy. I know MAPC had a really good letter they sent to the state outlining there's all sorts of concerns. I don't think a lot of them are super pressing as long as the state isn't going to be really harsh about enforcing it, but they definitely are aware. And I think everyone involved is trying to get something put together that will satisfy the towns. So yeah, on December 10th, I would encourage at least maybe one or two of you from the Affordable Housing Trust. And if any of you is also on planning board or anything like that, that would also work. But we'll have another opportunity and hopefully someone from EOHLC to talk to.
Yeah, it's really meant to be kind of peer-to-peer, like planning board, affordable house trust, just sharing kind of your concerns and thoughts around on the new legislation and so forth.
And at the last one we actually had, I believe it was a building inspector was on the call, and which we're not really, I do land use and zoning mostly, but he was talking about on the building inspector side, which is something I obviously don't really pay a lot of as much attention to as I should. And so it was really informative kind of talking through all the different, because it's mostly going to be building inspectors enforcing the policy if towns aren't getting their bylaws figured out by February. So thankfully you guys have something on the books, but a lot of towns weren't able to get anything done for the fall. So that was really good insight because it sounds like all the building inspectors around the state are struggling to, they're all rushing to get something like guidelines of their own put together. But I would be surprised if the state doesn't have something by the end of the year, just based on how angry everyone is, and they have a whole position that's ADU coordinator now. So I would hope they have something ready before the holidays, but who knows?
Okay, now, we got a couple options here. I mean, anything else that the regional housing coordinator, again, that doesn't have to do with the action plan, anything else to bring up, or should we jump to the regular agenda?
I mean, I don't think so. Yeah. I mean, Trish, unless you think there's anything else that's pressing.
No, I think she's, as she's doing with the other towns that are part of the regional housing coordinator position, she's kind of routinely just kind of preparing kind of this is what I've done this month, and kind of laying out kind of an action plan like you suggested. I don't think as Upton is kind of the last town to participate, I don't know that she's completed that for you guys yet or not, and that may be what you're looking for. But we can touch base with Jasipa tomorrow if she's feeling better and make sure she's got that up on her radar.
So three big items on the agenda. We have 28 Hartford Avenue North. We have the bylaw update, and we have the Affordable Action Trust action plan update. And I didn't know, seeing that we have Trish and Gabe on the phone, if we wanted to flip the agenda around so we don't have to sit through the rest of the meeting. Are folks okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we start with that? Gabe and Trish, do you want to give an overview, or do you want us to just?
Yeah, I just before we start, do you have printed copies there?
Yeah.
Okay, good, because I could screen share, but
Well, Brian is on the, Brian, Brian
Yeah.
has his copy. Yeah. Brian
oh
is
yeah,
on
for
that.
Brian, of course.
Yeah.
I can screen share.
No, Brian has his copy. He's
Oh, okay.
like that, so
Yeah,
he
and
printed it out before in Kansas.
he provided me with comments as well, which I have also. I guess you guys have the copy with Brian's comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is thank you all for meeting tonight. I apologize if there was any miscommunication about the process. It was definitely not intentional on our part. But yeah, as I'm sure you're aware, we talked to Brian in September, I believe, and through the months of September and October, and in the last couple of weeks, we've been able to conduct 7 stakeholder interviews, which I believe was detailed in the memo that I sent out a couple weeks ago. But yeah, basically, I think it's a pretty straightforward document. We start off with an executive summary that kind of talks through, a one page information about the plan. We have an introduction that discusses the makeup of the Affordable Housing Trust Board, and talks about some of the history of the Affordable Housing Trust in Upton. We look at, we have some background information on local housing needs and objectives. So we have a little bit of a page of demographic information about Upton and some of the information about the housing stock in Upton. Then we reviewed several relevant housing related plans in Upton. So we started with the master plan in 2005. And then we also had Emily, who helped with the housing production plan. Also, she worked on this section, but she summarized the housing production plan that the town passed in 2023 and kind of reviewed all the different goals and objectives of the housing production plan. We also reviewed, after just talking through the strategy with Mike, we decided that doing stakeholder interviews would make more sense than doing another survey, because there was the housing production plan survey in 2023. And I think Mike was concerned with MBTA coming up. He didn't want to confuse people with having a affordable housing trust survey at the same time that we're trying to get MBTA compliance passed. So we drew from that survey from last year, and we're able to find some key insights. I believe we had over 350 respondents last year, which for a town the size of Upton is a pretty good response rate. And then we go through all the stakeholder interviews and summarize the consent, what we found from the stakeholder interviews. I will say we have pretty clear consensus on some of the problems in Upton. the housing stock does not really serve younger families and professionals, and does not really serve senior citizens. So that's a clear need. And then there's also some clear issues with zoning policy in town. Some of the requirements, for example, to build a duplex, which isn't directly related to the Affordable Housing Trust, but is indicative of there's changes that we want to be needed if we want to increase the amount of market rate housing, if not affordable housing. There's a lot of gaps with community engagement in town. I can go. So Brian actually provided notes, and I might just go through his notes once we get through the summary, and we can talk through them. But I am curious to hear about how the MBTA, how town meeting went with MBTA. It did pass, which is good, but I'd like to. That'd be interesting. And then we summarize the community priorities. And then finally, we get to, based on all this information, we put together a mission with, sort of 4 main points of the mission. We had a set of strategic goals with objectives and strategies outlined. And then we also put together a list of operational goals for the Affordable Housing Trust. Taking all that information, we put together a 5-year action plan with a list of short, medium, and long-term actions, in addition to ongoing actions. And we put together a few matrices to kind of visualize those actions. We have a 5-year action plan matrix, a 1-year action plan matrix that breaks down the activities month by month. And then we met with Brian and put together a 5-year budget for the Affordable Housing Trust based on primarily on expected CPA appropriations. And then we have a section on operations and funding strategy where we talk through operational approaches for the Affordable Housing Trust, some operational strategy, and then some operational strategies for the Affordable Housing Trust. And then in the final version, we'll attach the results of the housing production plan survey and the trust declaration and any other supporting documentation you want to include. So that's the high level overview. So yeah, before we get into it, I guess, are there any more questions up front? Brian provided a lot of really helpful points of discussion that I can go through, but I don't want to just rely on his input. So if anyone else has any input before we get into his, it'd be helpful to hear it.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Brian says. The things that you said, you noted, Brian, were some of the things that I noted because I printed it at home. And yeah, there's a really, really interesting points and things that really need to get some clarification on. And as you said, the things that you were concerned about were the things I was concerned about too. So I think it's a good idea. I personally think it's a good idea to go through the notes that Brian made.
Before we go through the notes, I do have a question. First of all, I know people want me to leave quickly, but my term doesn't expire until 2026. I was reappointed. So you're stuck with me.
I was gonna say.
The other thing is, I think the last time we spoke, there had been 4 interviews. Who were the additional 3?
Let me pull up the list.
Tanya as well.
It was one second. Let me pull up the list. Sorry.
Tanya from the senior center was one of them.
Yeah, so it was Tanya from the senior center, Marcia Kozlowiecki, who Mike thought would have sort of an alternative take on the approach. And then Sarah Plutnicki, who's a CMRPC employee who lives in Upton and we thought might have unique insight. She grew up in Upton. Basically mostly people who are involved in boards and commissions of the town. We also talked to Brian, and then Marcia and Sarah, who is a planning professional who lives in the town.
Okay, and just one overarching comment, and I think, Brian didn't touch on it, but, I understand this is sort of like an action plan that lays out in an ideal world, but there are just a number of things in here that I really don't think we have the capacity to do. We're talking about the focus of preserving housing. When we're talking about acquisition of housing to preserve, when we're talking, there's just a lot of things. I mean, basically our staff is Mike.
Mhm.
And Mike is, a lot of people point to Mike when it comes up to staff. And, I'm sort of looking at, just a number of the action items, like
Yeah.
here's things we want to do. And, not even goals, but action items, like we can't do that. At least we can't do it yet, we need to start, something once we're up and running and have revenue coming in, then we can do. And I also didn't quite understand the $25,000 that we're supposed to raise to sort of fund some of these things. I didn't know where that came from. But again, those are just things that you can address when you're going, through the plan. I just wanted to, put those out there to start.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think this was, we reviewed plans from other towns, I think was when, we looked at what other towns have put forward as affordable housing trust plans. And those are probably towns with more substantial staffing than Upton. So I think I would certainly be in favor of, if you guys want to winnow down and make it a more focused plan, I think that would be really productive. It's good. It's good to hear that, honestly, because as I was putting together, as we were putting together the document, I did think, wow, this is a lot of stuff for 5 people and Mike. Trish, do you want to?
You do have Jasifa. I think that, that part of the goal behind having her on board, as a kind of a contract is to bring not only her experience working with other towns in their affordable trusts, but, her ability to kind of bring in other knowledge. And then I don't know if you guys can see what I put in the chat, but now that you're moving toward the MBTA community stuff, you also become eligible for this new pot of money called the Catalyst Fund. And I can't remember. I read the plan last Friday, but so another pot of money really kind of designated toward you guys that you can tap into. So I think you've got those additional resources to really help make some of the and admittedly, I think some of the goals are pretty aspirational and maybe won't happen in the short term, but it's good to kind of keep your eyes on the prize and realize that there are other resources out there. So I think Gabe is pretty eloquent in being able to capture kind of that in his writing and really kind of pointing to this is what we're aiming toward. We know it's not all going to happen in 2 or even 5 years, but down the road, it's about creating these opportunities and looking at capacity in different ways. So.
I think it might also be helpful to think about, if you have this set of actions, you don't need to take all the actions. But I think if an like Trish, like what Trish said, sort of, if there's an opportunity to take action, I think it is helpful to have that identified so you can justify it to yourselves and to the rest of the town, that this pot of money opened, this developer came to us, whatever. And this we passed this action plan. This is on our list. This is something that should happen in Upton, and you should put money towards to make happen. I think we work a lot on master plans as well, which are much broader than this plan. But a lot of the things in master plans, we review old master plans and we say, oh, nothing XYZ was implemented. This wasn't implemented. But part of the goal of the master plan is that when you go to the state for funding, you can tell them, we put it on a piece of paper that we want to do this. This justifies us getting the grant that we're going for. So I totally appreciate the capacity concerns, and I think we can massage it to reflect that. But I do think if these are things you'd like to see in an ideal world, I don't think there's harm in having it out there, because you never know what the state is gonna. They have this ADU change. I don't think any of us saw that coming. They have this MBTA fund. I didn't know about that until they told us about it. So we don't know what the state is very aggressively promoting housing production right now. So we don't know what is in the works in terms of funding right now. And I think a lot's going to happen in the next decade or so.
Kelly, could I just add on that? I definitely share the concern of when you see it, it's overwhelming, and like it's 5 of us. And then I've also then reflected after, when didn't have it in front of me. One way, and I think that this has been helpful in past experience, is maybe we tailor that fiscal 26, that's our first year, right? In very actionable expectations that we are going to do this. And then the others are like the strategic goal. So you got an operational plan, and then you got the 4-year strategic plan. And I've been in businesses where that's how it's viewed. And oftentimes it would be an annual process. Oftentimes those strategic things just kept rolling forward, and then they got into the title window, and then they started to come in. Or sometimes things change and we scrap them off the strategic plan. But a lot were very aspirational, especially on the 4th and 5th years out.
Yeah, and I think
I felt
we
a
wanted
little
to-
better that with that framework, frame of mind, I felt a little better about that. Because we all want to succeed.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we're talking about too is with the inclusionary zoning. You know, there probably will be some capital coming in when people don't want to build a house and they give us a check instead. You know, so, you know, that will sort of generate, but it just was like, I'm looking at some of this stuff and I'm like, this is just, you know, our scope is to build affordable housing, you know, that's, you know, it's like, I tend to be laser focused on that, if people have noticed. And you know, it's some of the stuff gets more away from that. And I'm just like, no, I just focus on building. So anyways, okay, so Gabe, you want to just,
Yeah, we can go through each section. So I'm gonna just read. I have Brian's notes right here. It seems like you all do too. So I'm just gonna go through the notes, and then if there's anything else we want to get at, we can talk about it. So the first is in the introduction. We want to confirm the date that the town approved the Affordable Housing Trust. So Brian, I think you said you thought it was 2014. We had it in our minds that it was 2015.
Yeah, the only reason I thought that, it was that in 2014 at, I think it was a special town meeting, $200,000 was granted to, I thought it was the Affordable Housing Trust. Those funds did come under our control, but that's what triggered that. I think that this is earlier than 2015, and maybe it was even earlier than 2014 if a request was made from this group. I don't know that for sure. And Michael, did you know how we could maybe find out for sure?
Yeah, Brian, I seem to recall a conversation about like those funds going to some sort of like iteration of this trust.
this was
Trust.
the other, this was the
Oh,
other funds that
okay.
we already sent back it was given to,
7,000 something.
yeah,
else.
yeah.
Yeah, like that was like from 2010 or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that was earlier.
Yeah, I thought this, and we can just check the warrant. I thought we already went through this exercise. We can just check the warrant, can't we?
Yeah.
The 2014
Yep.
town meeting,
So
because I think that's what it was.
sometimes it says right on the bylaws.
Yeah.
When things were
Oh.
adopted.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that's the other. We also wanted to confirm the date that the town adopted the bylaws.
Adopted by town meeting. The town adopted in May of 2012. Title 3, Chapter 23 of the bylaws.
So both happened in 2012. The trust
I'll go back
bylaws.
to that. I'll look at the town meeting warrants for that, but this is at the very top of the Affordable Housing Trust bylaw. It says
Okay.
history adopted by the town meeting of the town. I mean, I think this is specific to the bylaw.
Yeah.
Because it's
Okay.
looking at the bylaws.
but bylaws will be adopted at town meeting.
Okay.
Yes, they are.
There.
All right, and then a correction from Brian. Term of office is 2 years, not 3 years. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna move on just so we aren't keeping you too
Yeah.
late. So moving on to master plan objectives from 2005. And Brian, feel free to jump in if this, I
Sure.
was kind of curious what you wanted to say about this, but discuss if objectives 1 and 4 are complementary or oppose each other.
Yeah, it's the 80,000 square foot lot size in the agricultural residential area, very large, as we know, and we've seen that throughout the document. I agree with that. And then we have in section 4 or objective 4, encourage developers to use open space designs. So, which I interpret to mean more preserving the open space, denser actual construction.
Yeah, it's like
And-
cluster development, it's also called.
Right, yes, yep. So to me, those seem contradictory. Or is 80,000 units, square feet used to determine how many units can be built in a cluster zoning?
Just to go back a step, the planning board under its subdivisions, we do open space subdivisions. So you can get approval to waive certain space requirements in the interest of preserving open space. That's what Cobbler's Creek is. In fact, I think most of our, that's what Governor's Landing will be. There'll be a, that's why they can do it more densely. So that's something that's allowable under, the town bylaws when it comes down to, subdivision planning, it's open space subdivisions, But I do have a question on that, and I don't think this is wrong, but the 80,000 square feet, that's only, you're right, it's in agricultural residential, and that's a certain section, but a lot of Upton is not 2 acre zoning. A lot of Upton is 1 acre zoning or less. So I wasn't
A
quite.
lot of Upton is 2 acre zoning.
Is it?
Yes. The AR, the agricultural residential zoning district is 2 acres.
Okay.
That's most of the town.
If I'm saying a silly question, why?
No, it's to preserve, no, because my house isn't, I'm really moved up.
You are in, I think, SRC, which is 1 acre.
So, okay. I didn't
So
think most
if
people
we're just calling it out, this is from 2005, right? The master
Yeah.
plan. The only concern, Gabe, I was having is that someone's reading this document and then they latch on to this 80,000 square feet, which is I don't know when our zoning was done, but I'm guessing the 50s or the 60s when we had plenty of land and wanted to maintain that. So it's true, and you're calling it out, and maybe that's just fine. But now, I think in your future recommendations and actions, we talk about zoning. So this is this is in the summary part, so I have no problem with it being there.
Yeah. No,
It's
I
20 years
understand
old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it could be confusing if you're reading because it's just presented. I mean, that was the objective back then, but it's obviously not what I think any of us want to see now. So yeah, I wonder how we could. I wonder how we could present it in a factual way without making it seem like this is what the Affordable Housing Trust wants.
Could you just, right, because this is master plan goals, this is our master plan, or this is the town master?
This is the
Or
town
the-
master plan from 2005.
Okay, the town master.
Yeah, and I anticipate if you guys did a master plan in the next couple of years, it would not read like this. So
What if you, I mean, it doesn't change it, but what if you just strike the second line of that and do not reduce this? I mean, maintain, because if you're maintaining it, you're not reducing it. So what if it just simplifies it? It doesn't address Brian's concern, but if you just put maintain the 80,000 square foot size requirement that currently exists in Upton's ag res zone, period.
yeah, we could also just cut the reference to the master plan if we, because I will say, I think the housing production plan informs this plan. I don't think anything from the master plan is really reflected in this plan.
I agree.
And it does, like, this is what the trust wants to see. This is what the trust is drawing on for their goals. We don't need to reference the master plan if it's not what anyone wants.
And the master plan's obsolete. I think everyone.
Right. It's 20,
Well,
it's almost 20 years old. So I would, if I had the choice, I would just cut and go to the housing production plan review. Is that okay with people?
It's okay with me. In your experience, Gabe, is
Yes.
how people use this action plan, is it
Mhm.
important to have referenced the master plan?
I think if the master plan was from the last 5 or 10 years, I would say yes. I would tell you to reference it. At this point, I would not consider it like a valid document in a practical way.
Right.
I don't think anyone. You might get people who love the 2005 master plan and are upset you didn't rely on it. I don't know if that's a person, because most people don't read master plans. But I don't think anyone from the state or anything would be upset either, because the state doesn't have those goals either, right? It's not like you're excluding, the 2005 master plan said to increase affordable housing development. We don't want that because we don't want affordable housing. That's not what you're doing.
Mhm.
So it's a reflection of what the board wants, and if the board, clearly you guys don't like the 2005 master plan, I don't see any problem. I mean, I think Trish might be having technical issues. She could chime in if she thinks it would be an issue, but I don't think it would be an issue.
No, I think you want to just make sure that you tell people you've read the master plan. It was a part of the research for this. I don't think you have to reference it just for the sake of referencing it as a go-to. You know, we're leaning heavily on the master plan. You know, so I think you definitely want to cite the document. You read through it. That
we could cut the goals and objectives section, or cut the objectives too. And just say this is the past master plan. We read this. Like, you don't need to. People can go read the master plan if they want to see what it said. But if we read it, we didn't draw on the goals and objectives in a substantive way. And it's not what the board wants. So.
Like, we have no plans right now to update the master plan, correct? No. That would be on the planning board, right? Okay.
Now I'm looking at it, it says page 4, existing housing goals, and then down below it talks about master plan. Our existing housing goals are all influenced by the housing production plan, which is only a year old. So my vote of 1 is to remove it.
Yeah, I think you definitely want to go with a more relevant document. That's the one where you've got more input. You had the survey, you've got all of the stuff, the research. That data is more current. So I would reference the housing production plan if you're going to look back at something that drives you.
And the housing production plan was educated by the master plan, so it did incorporate, the 2005 master plan. So,
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I agree with Brian. Let's strike the reference to the master plan.
Completely.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So then moving on. So we have a comment on the housing production plan goals. Brian said Affordable Housing Trust needs to be aware of Chapter 40A, Section 3A. So that would be the MBTA community zoning law. So Brian, again, if you want to.
So in some place in this document and in the recommendations, it talks about increasing the trustees' knowledge. So this is what I suggest, including this, because this is a very relevant law in affordable housing, or not affordable housing, but expanding housing. So that maybe we can include that in one of the documents. You call out some things that we should include in like our training package.
Mhm.
We could put that in there.
Yep, absolutely. That makes sense. So I'm going to move on. We'll go through the rest of the housing production plan goals. We talk about the housing production plan survey. And then we get to under land challenges in the stakeholder. So we talked through the stakeholder interviews. Brian said we have discussed partnerships with conservation agencies. So that may have been put in error.
Or I could just be not aware.
Yeah. So what we say is, one interviewee identified land availability as one of the greatest obstacles to affordable housing in Upton. Although the trust has established partnerships with conservation agencies to secure land, they cautioned against relying solely on this strategy. So is it factual to say that the trust has an established partnership with conservation agencies? We may have been misinterpreting the interviewee.
The only thing I remember is that we did, the answer to your question is no. We have been working with the Open Space Committee. There have been discussions on a parcel of land, of doing a land trade, between conservation, the Pleasant Woods, which is West Upton Center, behind the Upton Inn, and a piece of land on North Street. They really are the Jones for that piece of land on North Street. So we were talking about maybe doing a trade because that's owned by the town. But that was one example. It wasn't,
Okay.
It wasn't. But there's also a typo there.
Okay.
It's one of the greatest affordable dowsing.
Fruitful dowsing.
Dowsing, yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right. So we can just cut that sentence, or what was the committee you've talked to?
Open Space Committee.
Open Space. Okay, so we can say they've talked to Open Space, but discussions with Open Space, but.
And I like his feedback, though. This interview is saying,
Yeah, that's the
caution
thing.
against.
This is feedback, then I don't wanna. Was this from Mike Penko or Bill Taylor?
I think it would have been Mike Penko.
Okay, because Bill is the chair, I think, of Open Space, and Mike was engaged, he's very engaged in those conversations. So I'm sure they were talking about the Pleasant Woods swamp.
Mm-hmm.
But that's
Cool.
not him.
So I think, Gabe, it's just the wording of established partnership that
Yeah.
you question. But I like his feedback, though.
Yeah, we can rewrite it to keep his feedback, but make it a little less, make it correct. So I'm going to move on to zoning and policy opportunities. So Brian said how to leverage inclusionary zoning. So do we
Kathy, I was wondering, an inclusionary zoning, because that is now a law, right, in the town of Upton?
Yes, bylaws, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think this is maybe this is kind of a mental note, is how do we work in some of our goals? I think it's year 2 or maybe even year 1, when we're working with developers and trying to increase the amount of affordable housing that they include in their developments. So there's no action needed there. It's mindful of us working with the zoning board and the planning board to stay closely in touch with them with our goals and using their laws that they put in place.
Cool. And then community engagement. You said the MBTA discussion was reflective of the lack of community engagement. Just briefly, I've helped with MBTA in other towns, so I'm curious what happened there.
I mean, from my perspective, and other folks can chime in, I was surprised because there was no opposition expressed at town meeting to the concept of MBTA communities. And I think it's because people were not aware.
Yeah.
That this was the objections that came up had to do with folks didn't want it on Main Street. They wanted it on the outskirts of town.
Right.
And so there was discussion about that, and they were critical of the process. Because they said that they were unaware that this was coming up. And that was basically ruled out of order. I mean, you couldn't, that had no bearing on the
Right.
item that was on the, so that was sort of shut down. So there was very little honest discussion on it, but the only opposition again was to the location of the zone. There was no opposition to the concept of MBTA.
Right, yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, as far as these go, that's not the worst that's not the worst outcome, but
and we were
that's
on the field
interesting.
of Auburn. I think it was Auburn, which I guess was a hard show. So,
Was it?
yeah, they rejected it. I guess it was personal, it was nasty.
Ugh.
It was interesting. My takeaway was I was shocked by people not knowing about this MBTA zoning district, even just the concept of it. Because some of the questions about, we don't even have the train in town. That was interesting. And then the other part was the people that were abutters to it either honestly represented that they had never heard of this until like a few days ago when a neighbor mentioned it to them. It's like, I'm sure there was a lot of effort trying to reach these people. And so my takeaway is, I completely agree we need to do community engagement, but you could probably do it until you're blue in the face, and some people will never even come up until it impacts them directly because it's this project's going about their land.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brian, I'm shaking my head aggressively. I mean, as Gabe and I'm sure Trish can attest to, no matter how much reach you do, you will get that same exact criticism when it comes to whatever the vote that needs to happen. There will be somebody says, well, this is the first time I'm hearing about this. And it's, it makes us feel bad because we do want to know about it, but.
Mike, it shouldn't make you feel bad. We do our best
Yeah.
to, if you have taken interest in your hometown, you know what's going on in your hometown.
Yeah.
The majority of people don't care.
Yeah.
So,
You could probably go door to door in every house in town, and people would, I mean, just the response rate, people would be mad they weren't at the door when you knocked.
And I presented about it at the senior community center to the coffee talk with the manager, and I talked about it. Nobody had any questions about it.
How many people were there?
It was a good amount. I think it was like 20 or so. Yeah, it wasn't.
Wow.
People attend those.
No, it was, yeah.
Free coffee.
there's always free coffee at the senior center.
Yeah.
Brian.
Oh,
No, there isn't. I went to get the free coffee once and I took filthy people's coffee and they're really mad at me.
Not their coffee, it's everybody's coffee.
No, it wasn't. It was private coffee.
I got done talking about MBTA and then ADUs because I threw in ADUs because I thought, oh, well, this will maybe excite them. And then as soon as I was done talking, it was the immediate question was like about like a street closure somewhere.
Yeah.
So like, obviously the concerns are more relative to what will impact me today, which is totally understandable, but like, yeah.
All
No,
right.
I walk a lot and I talk to people about this stuff. And when you first bring it up, it's like, you always have to explain to them why it impacts them.
Yeah.
Because, you talk about ADUs and they're like, oh, that's great. And it's like, well, the way it's written, there's some problem, and then they're like, what? You can do that, blah, blah, blah. It's like, so you actually have to explain it to them, but that's a different story. Okay.
Yeah.
So to go on, because we do,
Sorry.
I'd like to wrap this up if possible in about 15 minutes, no
Yep.
more than that.
Sounds good. So moving on. So advocate for thoughtful. So we go through summary of community priorities. And then under advocate. So then we go to mission. Under advocate for thoughtful development. Change focus to strong consideration when looking at adaptive reuse and rehabilitation. So I think I agree with that.
mhm.
I think I would say we will consider adaptive reuse. I would say something like we will consider adaptive reuse and rehabilitation of existing properties like when feasible. I
I
don't,
like that.
yeah.
Good.
I don't think it's, this isn't a historic preservation committee.
Mhm.
Moving
This
on.
but there should be an apostrophe after trust, right, with the trusts. TRUST, yes, goals.
Yes.
I used to be an editor.
And then moving on to, we look at strategic goals, increase affordable housing units. So under preserve existing housing, I think that was intended on our end to be about SHI housing. We're not talking about random single family homes. I think this is specifically making sure that SHI units stay SHI units and are still viable properties for people to live in. So does that still reflect does that address the because Brian said would this just be concerning SHI properties when I talked about rehabilitation? So
Right, good.
yeah, so I think we're specifically I can clarify that, but we're going to specify that is about just SHI properties because I agree. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
want to make
just
sure
to-
they don't think we're fixing up people's properties.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just to go back a step, strategic goals, the first one, we already had safe harbor,
I submitted, the state has not responded yet
okay.
for,
but that's already in, there's sort of been an update to that section.
Okay.
And so what you're talking about, again, if talking about the strategic goals for rehabilitation, even for SHI, at this point, if this is an aspirational goal, we can include it, but I just don't see that as, it's one thing to look at Coach Road Apartments or, the old hat factory and make sure that we maintain those if they do expire, but it's another thing to look at rehabilitating and maintaining aging properties. I just don't see that. That's just too in the weeds, I think, for what we do. Well, what we have the capacity to do. So if it's an aspirational goal, I don't see any harm in keeping it in.
Are you talking about the second paragraph, acquire distressed properties?
Rehabilitation programs for renovating and maintaining aging properties.
Okay.
To ensure
And
they're
that-
affordable.
And that's
and
where
safe.
we're gonna add something about the SHI units, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, we can clarify that's about SHI units.
All right. And then as I read the second paragraph, I didn't comment
Yes.
on it, but now I don't know why I didn't. I would recommend us not to have that as a strategy because I'm just thinking of the nightmare we have on 28 Hartford Ave North.
that's what I was thinking.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was a last minute addition. I think we found out about this AG grant, and so thought it would be helpful to have on radar. But yeah, that's cool.
We're going to strike that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. So then,
And then the
Move on.
25
Oh.
funding programming to support tenants and homeowners. I just don't see tenant and homeowner support as something that we do.
I don't know.
I mean, even aspirationally, we're not a housing authority.
okay. So what would be a helpful, because we want to have a target of something that you can point to and say, sorry? Sorry?
somebody was just talking in the background for Tricia's.
Oh, okay.
She's all set.
So someone, yeah, so what would be a helpful target? Do we want to say because one of the actions is to review the SHI, like the subsidized housing inventory, frequently. Should we say a target then is to ensure that we're not losing SHI units?
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
And if you need to put, for the purposes of writing grants, if you need to put the secure 25,000, you can always put to monitor and ensure that we don't lose existing SHI.
Okay. Cool.
Too
All
many
right,
acronyms.
you're telling me. Um, so then under foster community engagement, we have the comment, include the work the housing coordinator would do to support this goal. I think under community workshops, Brian.
That's what they would do, support community workshops.
I believe that's your comment. Scroll. I have it in a note, but I can go to the
Yeah,
specific.
no, I'd say, okay. Oh, for targets. Yeah, so
Yeah.
the, and I'm not, so I don't
Oh, yeah,
understand
I see.
what the work, I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, so I think it's, and Trish maybe started off by saying that for some other towns, Yasifa is providing what work is being done. It sounds like in an ongoing basis. I may have misunderstood that, but if that is the case, we do want that because we had talked about that at a prior meeting, and that would be helpful to have.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can understand how for us to use the regional housing coordinator more effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can. So I think Trish is having serious technical issues. I'm not sure what happened on her end.
I kind of like the grin on her face.
Yeah. But I can talk to Jasifa and Trish about clarifying that section, just so it's a little more specific. I agree.
Yeah, and I do like the it sounds like maybe like hosting workshops, creating the presentation materials that would go along with that,
Mhm.
online platforms. Are those services that the regional housing coordinator can provide to us and does provide to other towns, and we just need to do the same?
I believe so. I think especially I think if the town had platforms, the regional housing coordinator should. Yeah, Trish says yes. She just messaged. So yeah, those are things that the regional housing coordinator could do. So we can clarify that.
Okay.
And then moving on, establish a robust operational framework. So yeah, we get through all the strategic goals, go to operational goals on page 17. So does the Affordable Housing Trust agree with hiring a staffer? So this is something I believe I discussed mostly with Mike, but I think the planning office is looking at, it does seem like you guys are looking at expanding, and I think supporting the Affordable Housing Trust would be part of that.
Yeah.
And I agree with, so I agree with the position. I just don't know if the agreement also carries the budgeting and commitment to go forward.
I think the Jasifa position is meant to be kind of interim, kind of as kind of more of a test position, was my understanding. Let's see what this additional capacity can do for you guys as an affordable housing trust. If it makes sense and you want to ramp it up, then you've at least had that experience. She's sorry about the technical difficulties. It's been one of those days. Outlook is just never working all day today. But so Jasifa's doing similar work in the town of Berlin, the town of Shrewsbury, I forget the Auburn. So bringing those experiences to you guys, well, I think you will benefit from their experiences. I myself, I sat on the Stowe Affordable Housing Trust for the longest time before I wrote your first housing production plan back in 2012, which is part of why I think you guys are in existence now, is because that was one of the things. You guys needed a body to actually be able to implement all that good, with those good thinking that was back then. And then as Emily worked with you guys on the update of that plan. But my sense is that Jasifa, in her limited time that she's going to spend with you guys, I mean, you're not going to bring on like a full-time person. I mean, you've got Mike there. He's got his plate full, but Jasifa adds that extra capacity to kind of add to this. I think if you decide you need more of that, that's definitely an option, whether you do that through CMRPC or you decide you want to, bring somebody on Upton employees. Those are all
Yeah.
options.
I mean,
And Mike,
just
is
to
there-
help that, I think that once we start getting, again, when the developers, if a developer is building and they give us $100,000, we're going to need someone to do that. We're going to need someone to, help manage these projects, to submit the paperwork. I mean, you've talked about the project, Brian, that you went and visited. We need someone to be the quarterback of this type of stuff.
Yeah.
Because we can't do it and he can't do it. And eventually, maybe we are talking about a full-time position, but that's way down the road. But I
Yeah.
think we don't need our own person. We need someone that works for us.
Who's gonna pay for it?
Well, it would come from, again, it's not immediate. It's when we start getting up and running, but under inclusionary zoning,
Yeah.
the money would come,
Okay.
for the payment in lieu of a house would come to us.
Mhm.
So if we have a development coming in and there are 2 houses they don't want to build, that's $250 we'll have. So
I'm sorry, Kathy.
that's okay, I'm done.
Mike, in headcount planning, is there any discussion about expanding the planners on your team?
Yeah, I mean, my office is advertising for an assistant planner right now. Unfortunately, so are a lot of towns.
Uh-huh.
So
And that was Grace's former position, right?
essentially, we elevated the position to be an assistant planner, partly in hopes that she'd come back.
Managed to persuade her back.
And now she confirmed that she is happy to stay in Rhode Island, which I thought she would.
Shame.
They have affordable housing.
So guys, we
Oh.
got 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we have 2 options. We can sort of rush through this, or we can wrap up this section and regroup at the next meeting. I just want to have a little bit of time to talk about, Hartford Ave and the bylaw.
So, yeah, I think we don't have a ton more on this list to discuss. I think Brian had a good comment when we talked about develop relationships with organizations that serve underrepresented communities. He said, what is the capacity for this? What does success look like? I think that is, I would say the value there for the Affordable Housing Trust is mostly in the community outreach aspect. Developing, if there's organizations that can help you reach the people who don't always show up to town meeting, I think that would be very valuable. If you can get in touch with people in town who are going to support zoning changes that you want to see, that can be politically useful. But again, tracking that as a goal, it can be a little ambiguous, I think. And then Brian also talked about adding an action on developing a relationship, furthering the relationship with the Community Preservation Committee and developing a grant writing process. I can absolutely add those as goals. I think if we're talking about the next 5 minutes, I think we should just come to a consensus on how to move forward with the project. I think, so like we've discussed, the project does have a formal end date of December. I feel very happy with how this looks, and I think there are obviously edits that could be made. I think what I would recommend is that if we could, I would be happy to solicit comments from you guys, like if you want to send written comments over email. I already have quite a bit we could tweak. If there's any more you want to work on over the long weekend, or and send over email, and then if we could meet the week at least before Christmas I can bring forward a final draft and we can just confirm that it's good. If that's a path you guys want to take, we can talk about that. But if you think we want to extend it to January, that'll have to be we'll have to discuss that.
Why don't we do that? Why don't folks take another look at this and do any?
Sorry about that.
I need my dad's gavel. So why don't people take one more look at the action, look at the discussion to the farm where there's sort of say what we're gonna be doing. Any edits, is anything like that?
I think Brian, For doing that.
Yeah, you've done tremendous work, as always, Brian.
It's very helpful to see his comments.
Good.
and the way to read the documents.
So why don't we do that and then we will meet, again, do you have any limitations that we can decide?
Let me just pull it.
The one before Christmas?
That'd be
Uh,
the 16th.
The 16th, 17th, 18th. Yeah, I can meet on the 16th
This is
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Okay. This month, the 16th.
or the 17th.
17th? Can you do 17th?
Mhm.
Okay, why don't we do that, 5 o'clock? That helps with an agenda item.
Actually, you can put it in.
Okay,
Perfect.
okay, so why don't
What day
we
we
do that about the call and we can
5 p.m.
go talk to about the other stuff.
All right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. This is very productive. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
See you guys. Thanks.
Bye.
Good work.
Wednesday, so I've been told.
Okay. Sorry about that, folks.
Yeah, we will.
So, I'd like to
I think I'm off.
talk briefly about 28 Hartford Avenue North. And then spend a little bit of time on bylaws because we're gonna have another meeting before we have to submit this to town meeting. So we can get into, details on that later, but 28 Hartford Avenue North, discuss next steps with regard to requests for proposals for redevelopment, I do, just to take some of Mike's. Actually, Mike, do you want to give a quick overview of what's going on with Habitat, what's going on?
Sure, yeah, I reached out to Habitat to obviously fill them in on where we are with things, obviously with the identifying that the bylaws need updating, that the fact that this trust can't act on that proposal right now, given the constraints that are in the bylaws. which
You're
is-
aware of that, right, Gina?
Say again.
About the issue with, we can't give more than $50,000 per year to an entity, which sort of precludes
No, I
us
didn't realize, I didn't.
supporting, yeah. Yeah, this came out of bylaw, Brian's bylaw review. So we can't do that, but what Habitat then wanted to do was go directly to the CPC and get funding from them. So,
So yeah, that's basically what's on the table right now, is that how the Habitat understands the pickle that the trust is in, but is still willing to entertain working with the town for this project. And they suggested that, with the recognizing that the trust can't proceed with them currently because of those constraints, the CPC has no such constraints. And entities such as them can appeal to the CPC to use their funds, CPC funds, for the pursuit of housing, because that is still under, that's one of the 3 categories that CPC can give money towards, right? Is housing, preservation, and open space, I think is the.
that's open space and open space recreation is one, historical is another, I
Preservation,
think, and
yeah.
then
And housing.
What are they do? Is it on the books for them to approach CPC? Yeah.
well, let's,
That's kind of what we're
yeah,
discussing now. is like,
let's talk about, yeah.
The Habitat wanted to come to the trust and basically just discuss that scenario with you all and potentially get your support for it, because they don't want to proceed with, they don't necessarily want to go to CPC if they don't have the support of the Affordable Housing Trust for doing that.
Right.
So that's basically the option on the table. I conferred with Brian on that. He suggested, and I agreed, that before you have that meeting with Habitat, they should update their proposal formally for you all to review. That's what they'll do. So I told them to go ahead and do that, and they agreed that they would.
I have a question. If they were to go to CPC and pitch it, and then they got support, does that roll? I know we get funding from CPC, right?
That would be money that we normally would be.
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
So it's sort of, yeah. I mean, just a couple
Give
of
them the money by.
quick things to add. It's, we had asked Habitat for 2 things back in the summer. One was to sharpen their pencils to see if they could reduce the cost And I don't think we've gotten that yet.
No,
The
the
other
specific
thing
ask
is-
was if they could, through you, Kathy, was if they could adjust the required income.
That
to-
was
to
one.
Elevate
There were
it to
two.
80%,
Yes.
yeah.
There were two. We also asked if they could adjust, which would reduce because then more would come from a prospective
Yeah.
home buyer and less would have to come from the town. And they said, no, they cannot do that. So they'll basically put it to the lottery and whatever can't be supported by, you know, if a person comes in, was it 30% of AMI?
Mhm.
You know, then basically we'll have to make up the difference. So that's sort of where things stand. And one of the reasons that I really was interested in having this on the agenda is another thing that Brian had found out when he had flagged, when he was going through the bylaw, was the possibility, you know, there's a provision in the bylaws where we can abandon project by
Okay.
and, so, you know, Brian, can you put yourself on mute? Okay, yeah, we're gonna, I think we're gonna mute you. Okay, so, you know, I'm sort of looking at this, so basically, if we abandon it, the read is that we'll have to put back into the CPC, which the CPC has spent, which is probably about $200,000. If we don't, we're still gonna be eating that $200,000 plus. We're going to be forfeiting money, a significant chunk of change that would come to us from the CPC, housing funds designated from the CPC, that normally we could apply for. I am strongly advocating that we abandon the property and take the steps necessary to do that. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring that up is I really don't want to make the Habitat go through the exercise of, you know, doing all this work if we're not going to do it anyway. I think that at the end of the day, what their original proposal was is, you know, we would give them the land, so we would be on the hook for the $200,000 already spent. So there'd be no real, you know, and then
There'd be some affordable housing though.
it'd be one unit. And then the amount that they would get from the town.
People too, so we don't think about 3 cars there.
Brian, can you
Can you
mute
mute
yourself, Brian?
Yeah.
Thank you. So anyways, I feel bad. So I think they originally were gonna come back to us for another 200, about 260, I think.
Oh, so this is gonna.
And then they were gonna come to the town, which probably would have come from the CPC for the same amount of money. And I sit on the CPC and I would vote against it.
Yeah.
I have no interest in, I would rather look, you know, as we've talked about and is in the master plan, not spend this type of money on one unit,
Yeah.
but to look at
Mhm.
leveraging larger scale you know, either downtown
Or
or
what if it's only abandoned, what happens?
we basically turn it back to the town. And I think the requirement is we have to pay back,
Mhm.
you know, there was 160,000 spent to, for 160 spent to purchase the land.
Yeah.
We'd have to do an accounting for it, then we pay tax. So we'd have to, you know, basically give them back 200.
What are they gonna do with it?
Yeah, good question.
What will the town do with it?
Put it up,
It's not our problem.
probably.
All right, so they put it for auction and whoever pays for that, can
Yeah,
that go
that's
back,
right.
can it go back to us to?
No, no, we wouldn't touch it. My recommend, once we abandon it, it's the town's problem. It's not our problem anymore.
All right.
I mean, I want to start.
Well, race is what, 450, you're saying 400, 450 for one property at the end of the day? So 200 and another 200 or whatever?
Yeah, and then there'd be more because they want to come to the town for additional money.
That's crazy, yeah.
And yeah, it just, to me,
So
it's just not.
200 we have to pay. Where does that come from? This.
Brian, you,
I'm sorry.
We're almost done, honest.
I have to run very soon.
I know.
That 200 we have to pay back to them. Where does that come from?
So
CPC
Yeah.
funding?
I have a couple of, am I on mute or? That's
No,
trying to
you're
mute
not
myself.
anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta learn how to do that better. So I think we still need to challenge that $200,000 that we have to pay. The town council said, that's my belief, right?
Yeah.
I got to imagine and hope that the state, and this, I've always continued to be very impressed by the state, is that investments go sour in business, in public, everywhere. Is that that just would not make sense for us to have to find funds that we only get from the CPC. So we'd be asking them to give us money so we can pay them back until we get our own funds, and that could be through the inclusionary zoning. So I'd like to continue to challenge that, and I'm willing to take that on. So assuming that though and if that is the case, right? If we put in, I think we try to, I think when we did an RFP for selling it, it was related to affordable housing, right? Because we never have put it on the market for just a sale of land.
You can't.
We can't.
Just listing it, right?
I think in the RFP, there was a
It was a possible.
There was a possible option, should we not have received any bids for.
Oh, that's correct. But they would have to pay back, if I recollect, the amount that we had put into it, which was over $200,000.
I mean,
okay.
Realistically, if that property gets sold on the open market, the town's gonna make its money back. I mean,
Yeah.
buildable lots are going for $350,000.
Yeah.
That's to put a house on a lot.
But we didn't get a response for it.
No, but I mean,
So I think if we looked at, Mike, do we have any more quotes on demolition and removing all that material? If so.
but Habitat was able to get quotes on that. That they haven't provided yet. They were gonna provide that, assumingly they were gonna provide that in their more formal petition to the trust.
But that was tied to them getting the,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So one possibility, and what I recommend is that we do a little bit more, putting pencil to the paper and then coming back with proposals. One would be abandoning it, Kathy. Another is maybe selling it as is, and talking to a realtor. I just had a informal discussion with Bill McCormick, and I said, "Hey, Bill, this is the situation on that land." And he goes, and he did a drive-by. So there's no formal assessment and market values, all that, but with it having sewer and gas and water, and the houses in that area, let's say $600,000. That was just ballpark, and that was made up. He said that usually then that land would be 20%. I'm trying to make sure I get it right. 20% of the house value that you would put in. So that would be like $125,000 or $120,000. Did I do that math? Yeah. Is that possibly you could get a sale? And Mike, you think the land could be even higher? So maybe it's 120 to 200,000.
Yeah, based on what I've seen as far as lots that are marketed as buildable, like lots ready to go, but essentially all but permitted with a building permit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got the frontage. So if we could reduce that delta that we owe to the CPC through selling this land, and then also the other part is to figure out how do we get out of this without having to pay back any delta. We try to make the best situation possible, pay it back as what we can, and then we walk away. And CPCs, we said we learned a lot from this. And also too, make sure, I think it's important for everyone to understand, this Affordable Housing Trust was not the trust that decided to do this. And I think that's very important.
Since you volunteered to do this, I think I recollect that one of the things that town council seemed to think was that if we abandon it and the town took it, we have to pay back anything that isn't recouped with the sale of the property. So if the town sells it for $150,000, then we're only on the hook for $50,000. I think that was my recollection, and I
She
think,
said she believed that, her word was, I think, believe.
Yeah.
And I want to really challenge that greatly and hard.
yeah, okay.
Because
No,
like I say, this, but Joe also said that months ago, is that you have to pay it back. But that just makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Quite right.
If a deal goes south and it's not any mistakes or criminal activities, it was just an investment decision that went south. How do you penalize why should you penalize an organization for that?
No, I agree. One question for you. There's been no hazardous material removal?
No.
Okay. And that has to be done before the demo?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm,
So there's still those things that are gonna hamper, they're gonna impact the sale price
Oh,
and
yeah.
stuff. So, but anyways, so yeah, if you want to take that on, but I don't know if it's the will of this board to start looking at an exit strategy, not the developing of that property, but either through a direct sale by us or through abandonment to shift our focus to other
Again,
things.
I thought we couldn't sell it directly.
Well, we can, we just have to, according to what we heard from town council, is we can, but we have to recover all the money we put into it. So a developer would have to pay us probably above market rate. That's why we got a response when we did send that out.
That doesn't make sense, that's the whole thing, like.
Yeah,
But
it doesn't matter if it makes sense, it's where we're stuck right now. So I just wanted to, the question before the board, and I'd kind of like a resolution.
Can't we just like sell it for less and then just give back the difference?
Yeah, that's what we're talking
Well,
about.
that's what we talked, yeah, that's what we- yeah.
I think it's-
No, but one of the things that I just wanted to get, sort of get a sense of where the board is heading.
Okay, yeah, that's good to me.
We just want to move forward with looking at working with Habitat, or do we want to start just focusing
That whole
on,
thing is just a mess.
yeah, we
No.
want to just start focusing on
Yeah.
how to get rid of it.
Let's just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Untangle, sell it.
Yeah.
Brian,
Thank you,
is that
Brian.
where you're?
Yep, I like that. And I did mention to just Mike Penko, I didn't go, not at the CPC meeting, but just to Mike, this situation. And maybe you have talked to him or someone has talked to him, but he was quite a bit familiar with this and where we were. And he was open to our sympathetic to our situation, was open to what I was saying. What we'd like to be able to do is sell it, maximize what we can get for that land, pay back those funds that we have, but they're most likely, we expect a gap, and we want that to be forgiven.
Yeah, that would be the optimal.
So he was open to that. He was not like, oh, we just can't do that, but we have to determine whether the law allows that and start working with him on that. Okay.
Just
I-
one last thing on that, Brian, and then we can let you go because I know you
We
need
do
to.
want to take a formal vote on not proceeding
Yes, we
with
do.
Yeah.
28 Hartford Avenue.
Do I hear a motion not to proceed with
Make a
Habitat?
motion not to proceed.
A second.
Okay,
Hey, Mike.
yeah,
Can I ask a question then before we do?
yeah,
Mike, let's see, Habitat has not, I know, formally come back with their proposal.
Correct.
I remember that, I think one of the takeaways from that was we liked the idea that Habitat would develop it. We did not like the contribution they were looking from the town. We're okay with them, us giving the land to them, if I recall correctly. That was primarily our contribution. And I think it was maybe me versus the whole trust. We might be open to some contribution, but not I think it was $300,000 that they were looking for.
But yeah, I think.
Have,
Go ahead.
have they come back with, or are you aware, that contribution that they were looking for from Upton or the Affordable Housing Trust, have they quantified what that is and has it been reduced?
That's what we were gonna wait to get from them is a formal accounting update of they'd be proposing. We'd be hoping to get that number from them to solidify that. But it's my understanding that they wouldn't, when I spoke with Hank, is that they're likely not gonna decrease the
Okay.
contribution at all. Yeah.
Because if they were, and they did, and they're getting the contributions from other sources, then I'd love to continue with
Yeah.
Habitat developing this land. So to walk away not knowing that, I just feel a little uncomfortable.
Well, the proposal was, Brian, that we were providing the land and the town was providing infrastructure. Then on top of that, we were gonna provide, I think it was a little bit south of 300, and the town was gonna have to provide another little south of 300, which probably would have come from CPC funds. So the town would be on the hook for 2/3 of the cost, through us or through the town, the 2/3 of the development cost.
Well, it was you, the 30% was equated, and Brian, I went over these numbers with you over the phone, but I'm forgetting exactly what they were. The numbers, I believe, were, the 1/3 contribution was something to the tune of $150,000.
Oh,
Brian, but what we had been wrapping into that was the cost, the sunk cost of already owning the property and the investment in it currently, which has been to the tune of 180,000, right? So it's been 150 plus 180 already, plus potentially if the demolition wasn't wrapped into the transfer of it, I mean, yeah, then we're talking about upwards of $350,000 total contribution from this trust into that.
Can
And that's
I make a proposal then?
Okay,
could
well, there's
we-
actually a motion on the floor.
Oh,
So we have to vote on this motion, or trying to think of Robert's rules here.
You withdraw it with a second.
Okay, do you want to withdraw your motion to,
Okay, I'll withdraw.
she's withdrawing her motion, so you can talk about your proposal.
is that, because I understand the Habitat has done their work that they wanted to do. We might not be happy with it, but we haven't seen it. It sounds like it's complete, so why don't we have them come back and present it to us? Then we can determine, yep, it's just not something we can move forward with and conclusively make that decision. Because right now we're speculating that they won't be able to do it, and that's probably the case. But also, in fairness to them, they did go back and do some additional work. And let's give them that opportunity. The other thing is we could learn from them about the demolition, because we might want to use that demolition if we decide to sell it ourselves, and then have a clean lot for to put that on the market.
That's a
So
good point.
that's what I would like to see. And then after we have that, then we can determine what to do if we walk away from it.
Can we get them to come to our next meeting so this doesn't drag on?
I don't know, we have talked about having them come to this one and they didn't have the thing ready yet, so I mean, my sense on this is, again, I remember their proposal. And it was the total construction cost was over $700,000. That did not include land acquisition.
Correct, yeah.
And it was a third and a third and a third. So it was us, it was the town, and they would be responsible, Habitat would be responsible for 1/3. I just don't
One
see
unit,
any way that, with all due respect to Habitat,
how's that gonna change?
if they had come tonight, it would have been different. Because at least we would have heard them, but they're not gonna be able to get the town share down, and again, the town share. The town third will come from the CPC, which is money that otherwise probably would go to us.
Mhm.
I mean, if it's a will of this trust to wait, then we'll wait. But part of me is I just want to make this go away so we can get the action plan going. We can look at the priorities, we can look at our goals, and we can stop dealing with this, but we could start moving forward with, getting rid of the property. So we're not paying insurance and costs and running up liability and stuff like that anymore. It's just been consuming us for a year and a half now. But that's, if you want to make a motion, then that's fine, and, I'd be fine people don't share my enthusiasm for making it go away.
Well, I mean, maybe, I don't know, but they could come back, let's see what they, I mean, can they email it? Do we have to have a meeting? I mean, could we just,
How close, I mean, what is their timeline with this proposal they're supposed to be coming back with?
I mean, I don't think they have a time. I mean, his email back to me was said they'd work on it after the holiday. I assume
After
that means
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, but I didn't clarify.
Yeah.
May I suggest that we're scheduled to meet on the 17th. I know we're talking to those guys, but could we say to them, we have a hard date, 17th of December, you need to give us your proposal. We need to see the numbers and we need to make a decision, and that day is going to be the day.
Yeah,
If you haven't got a proposal for us, then we're walking away from the property or
Yeah.
whatever. But just kind of throw out an ultimatum. If this is it, we have to have this resolved before the end of the year.
Is that a motion?
That's.
That's the motion, yeah.
All right, second?
Second.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor? Gina?
I,
Aye.
Brian? I'm going to abstain.
Fine.
Fine, abstain.
No, I mean, it does, at least it gives us a date and some closure, one way or the
Oh, no, I agree with the concept.
I really do.
I
I
just-
just think of it too.
I can't even make, yeah. it's-
So Brian, are you still gonna start looking at the steps for abandonment
Or selling.
or selling? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, you're looking at a different, okay,
dispositioning it, yep.
yeah, okay.
And I also suggest that we look at the update to the bylaws at that time too, because
So, yeah, the one thing
This
that we
takes
didn't discuss tonight is the bylaws. What I'd like to do at the next meeting, if it's okay with folks, is I'd like to set strict timelines. I mean, times, because the group over there do tend to talk, particularly me, is I'd like to do Hartford Ave first.
Mhm.
If people could look at, take one last look at the action plan and send comments to Gabe. So he can incorporate them. If there's any major substantive comments, it's probably a good idea to include Michael on these too. But that should be brought to Michael's attention. And that way we can get pretty quick closure. It'll be approval rather than just going through it again. And then we can do a deep dive into the bylaws, because if we are changing bylaws, we have to get it on the warrant for the Springtown meeting, and that warrant opens sometime in January. So I think it's in December or January warrant opens.
Definitely not December.
that's January.
So with all that said, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
You do.
Okay, we're adjourned. You can go wherever you're supposed to go
Right,
now.
have a great
Right.
Thanksgiving.
Sorry,
Bye.
Brian.